This chronically anxious and disturbed 16-year-old.
She has Asperger's syndrome.
I can't wait for Stephen King's sequel, Children of the Climate.
This girl should be shouting to a therapist, not to the world.
If it were about science, it would be led by scientists rather than by politicians and a mentally ill Swedish child.
Can you believe that there are people on the planet that are paid money, good money, to devolve from ape to parrot on camera? That's what's known as propaganda. That is a tactic that has been employed since the Cold War, which as soon as there is a dissenting voice against the establishment that is gaining traction, they downplay the point and try to dismiss that person as crazy. But here's the new twist.
That she's basically a teenager.
Where we're using children as human shields.
Of the way the left disregards the health and well-being of our children.
Was a victim of child abuse.
Causing and instilling fear in millions of kids around the world.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Ben Shapiro, who first off, his clique of goons are implying that we shouldn't be listening to Greta because she has autism, but come on. If that man's not on the spectrum, then I'm not on the spectrum, and I have a pet snake and paint Warhammer. In his book, it was essentially a community newsletter that he printed and charged money for. Don't buy it. He brags that the way that he totally destroyed Piers Morgan, which, first off, hats off to you, Benny boy. Shame that every other British man on earth f***ing slays you. But he said the way he did it was to reframe moral outrage using children.
Is you tend to demonize people who differ from you politically by standing on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook, saying they don't seem to care enough about the dead kids. If they cared more about the dead kids, they would agree with you on policy.
That's why it's a little hard to believe his dickhead disciple here is above using children as a persuasion tool.
And a mentally ill Swedish child who is being exploited by her parents and by the international left.
We have the NRA on camera boasting that that is exactly what they do, and furthermore, they train media that is friendly to them to do the same thing.
How dare you stand on the graves of those children to put forth your political agenda? Yeah. Really shame them to the whole idea. It's like,
and when he received flack for dismissing her because she has autism and depression, Steven Crowder's pet boomer? Jesus, I thought having a snake makes me a loser. His pet is a loser. Why is he there? In case Crowder needs a kidney. You are a walking billboard for his merch, and you're older than him, Gerald. Surely you're not happy about how your life turned out.
Michael wasn't saying, we shouldn't listen to her because she's mentally ill. That's not what he said. He's saying people are using her. They're using a mentally ill person, and that's not right.
Dude. How about we replace Greta with you and autism with not talented? I'll argue the same thing. You ready? I am not saying that we shouldn't listen to you because you're not talented enough to have your own show. I'm saying that Steven Crowder is using you to look talented by comparison, and that's not right. It's time to stop the exploitation of Gerald Jr. What am I drawing attention to in that sentence, Junior? Your point? Or does it detract from your point to focus on the fact that the only reason you're there is to absorb the high-pitched squeals of Steven Crowder because you're a cheap alternative to recording foam? You're seriously making the point that it's immoral to be using someone with a mental illness to push an agenda. Well, Bible boys, let me put this in words you'd understand. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. You think I'm just throwing around accusations? Alex Jones admits it.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
And this isn't to smear Alex Jones. I love Alex Jones. He's the Eminem of YouTube. It feels so empty without him. I'm saying that just because someone is insane doesn't mean they're not right about things. They are turning the frickin' frogs gay. Abraham Lincoln had depression. Martin Luther King Jr. had depression. John Curtin, who defended us from the Japanese in World War II, had manic depression. Their point in World War II would have been, we're not saying you shouldn't listen to John Curtin about withdrawing Australian troops from Singapore to defend Australia. We're saying that they're using someone who's manic depressive to make that point, and that's not right.
Greta Swedish Chefberg. Sugar birdie birdie global warming, Paris the curtain, climate changing.
Yeah. How embarrassingly insular is that? That one reference I know from another country, kangaroos! What a goldfish. He was dismissing Steve Martin for making essentially the same joke minutes before in the same video.
This thing, people quote this all. Have you ever actually watched that sketch?
Yeah.
Two wild and crazy guys. It's not funny.
No.
One of the most important American comedians of all time who completely deconstructed joke structure and then reconstructed it into an unmistakably unique style. Yet this guy, the guy who bills his show as
Come with me if you want to laugh.
Quick tip that I've learned about going to the Melbourne Comedy Festival for years now. If someone has to advertise in their poster, "You're gonna laugh," there's one thing that you can guarantee about that show. You're not gonna laugh. But Crowder here has pointers for Steve Martin.
Come with me if you want to laugh.
I'm not ideologically blinded by comedy either. Instead of watching hack comedian after hack comedian on Netflix who thinks that the greatest joke on earth is to make this face and then say, Trump. You know what I watch instead? Trump. I'm not even being facetious when I say this. He is one of the greatest entertainers of all time. Gavin McInnes, hilarious. But you, Crowder, first off, you're fighting against nature as you sound like a helium balloon that's slowly losing air, but it goes on for an hour, 12 minutes, and 3 seconds. But on top of that, your wit, just like your shit movie about abstinence, sucks. Exhibit A.
How dare you?
And then here's
How dare you?
Exactly.
It's your country whose emissions have stolen my dreams to drive a Kia.
Yeah, but
Not
everyone
China
wants
or
to.
Kia? Or did you mean IKEA? Look at his face. Even if that made sense in his own head, he knew that was shit. Even Seth Meyers can cut to people in the crowd that aren't fake laughing at his jokes. Not only can you not do that, Crowder, but the people that you do cut to who are fake laughing are only doing so because their job depends on it. Just do what According to Jim did and get a canned laughter track. It would eliminate the patheticness of those moments.
Yeah, but
Not
everyone
China
wants
or
a
India,
Foxconn phone.
Oh my god, hang on. Just one more time, rewind that.
Yeah, but
Not
everyone
China
wants
or
a
India,
Foxconn phone.
Oh my god, they made a point about climate change in a discussion that should be about climate change. It was off camera, it was mumbled, it was promptly ignored, but I'll take it. You'll hear the Murdoch and Koch brother press say this all the time. China and India emit more emissions than we do, why do we have to do shit? Well, dickheads, if you look at the facts, that's actually spot on, they are right. But, did you know, China's population is 1.42 billion. In other words, the entire United States fits after their fucking decimal point. But oh no, when it comes to something like healthcare, America can't provide public healthcare to its people, it's bigger than Norway, bigger! Yet when it comes to China, size doesn't matter. Particularly when per capita both India and China have far lower emissions than the US, and the only reason that China has the highest emissions in the world is because the US and Europe moved all their manufacturing to China, thus China bears the brunt of the developed world's emissions, which you should know about seeing as your fucking mugs are made in China. Isn't it so perfect that the very symbol of his channel is an ode to his own contradictions? The fact that Crowder dismisses 928 out of 928 peer-reviewed scientific reports confirming that climate change is man-made, as well as NASA's own data. Carbon dioxide, global temperature. I know it's extremely ironic to say this when you're talking about NASA, but it ain't rocket science. A 16-year-old can figure it out, and yet you're mocking her for being distraught that world leaders are ignoring it. This is the graph equivalent of yelling, "Holy fuck, asteroid," and you sitting there saying, "Ha, triggered, oh f***." Given the situation, who's more rational? The depressed one urging world leaders to do something about a very depressing situation, or the guy who gets depressed every 2 weeks about the fact that YouTube takes a bit of his ad rev away? Oh my god, guys, it's happening again! Forget the apocalypse! Adpocalypse! In summary, there's a reason this bubble of media is focusing on a mental illness, and that's because she's changing the world. She's brought about global protests in the millions. She's instigated actual public policy change across cities, nations, and that's why the oligarchs that control this media are focusing on her. Because she's reminding the world that you don't have to play your little role, you don't have to go to work and pretend that a spatial extinction isn't on the way and that we're melting entire continents. That's what Scott Morrison is so upset about, by the way. That's his main point every time about, but she should be in school! Why isn't she in school? Just like all the great vehicles have changed before her. Rosa Parks, Gandhi, Fred Durst, Peter Layla from the Eureka Stockade. All it took was for someone to say, that's it, no more. I'm not just going to stand by and allow something like this to happen. I'm going to do the exact opposite of stand up. Sit down. You of all people should be heeding her message, Crowder. Stop doing stand up. Sit the fuck down. And play your part. Make sure you press the like button to cancel out all the Crowder fans that'll go, cherry picking, logical fallacy, I don't know what those things mean, can't give an example, but I heard Crowder say it, and I'm not an NPC. That is our meme, ours, the rational right.
Please share and comment below. Comment.
This obnoxious little girl, her name's Greta Thunberg, disregards the health and well-being of our children, lectured by a little brat. This obnoxious little girl, her name's Greta Thunberg, disregards the health and well-being of our children.
How about, like, you get to work on how we get the Chinese to lower their carbon emissions? We can start talking about a carbon tax.